Hi all, this is Simona Rich. In this video I will continue with the summary of Jonas Markunas' book, but first I will tell you what happened after I published I think the second summary of the book. So basically I started receiving death threats, and from their content I can understand that it's because I guess that lady that called me, if you watch that video about the dark side attacking me after publishing the first part of the summary of the Jonas Markunas book. So basically, I think it's the same woman that I guess wrote an article about me, and from the content of the threats that I received, it turns out that she wrote that I took the dog from the shelter, took some pictures with him and threw him away. That's probably what he wrote because of what kind of threats that I received. But basically, she did tell me that she is going to try to ruin my reputation, and she's trying to do that. And people send me messages with death threats, like random people probably who read her article or whatever she wrote about me. And also I received one comment saying that they found my dog, but that's a shady comment because they said, these shelter people tried to contact you numerous times, they really tried to search for you. And it's not true. I didn't receive any phone call, and they have my number, so I didn't receive anything. And basically in the comment it's told, they tried to contact you numerous times, your dog came back to the same shelter, which is, I don't think is possible, because I took the dog from Vilnius shelter, but I was very far from Vilnius where the dog went missing, which was around 140 kilometers away. So the chances of the dog coming back to the same shelter are so small that it's almost impossible, but that's what the lady claimed. But I was thinking about this. I want nothing to do with those mafia type of people that run the shelter. Even if somehow they manage to get the dog, it's not possible for me to take that dog back, because that means that I will be tied with that shelter for the rest of dog's life. And I will never make this mistake again, because to be tied with people who are psychopathic, who are almost demon possessed, watching you all the time and trying to ruin you because the dog went missing when it's not your fault, when you try to protect the dog. I'm not going to be tied with such people. So I don't think they have the dog. Maybe some kind of strategy to make me, get in contact with them, but this is not going to happen. It seems that they try really hard for me to respond to them in anger, or somehow it's probably just the trick of the dark side to make me negative, but this is not going to happen, because I understand how the dark side works. They try to trick you into making you upset or to react negatively, and then the dark side gets that energy. And I'm not going to lower my energy, and I'm not going to get tied with such people ever again in my life. I learned my lesson, and now I will trust my instincts. And if I see that, I will never ever get a dog from shelter again. I learned from it. And also they are microchipped and vaccinated, and I disagree with that. So for that reason also, but now I will be very, very careful with whom I'm getting into any kind of contract, because never again will I ever get into relationship with people that feel suspicious. Never ever, even if it's an indirect relationship, because there is still a tie, and I want no ties with darkness. So that's what happened after I published the second part of the book review, and here is the third part. And I'm not filming this video on my usual camera because I forgot to charge the battery, so I'm filming it on my smartphone. So here he talks about people that have psychic abilities who can help to heal people or to get information about like people that passed away. So if you use services of such people who have psychic abilities, he says that if they are not aware, they can pick up like negative entities and they can be affected by the negative energy fields of the people that they do consultations for, and then you may take over that, especially if they touch you. And I found this to be true again. And I don't believe everything that this person says, Jonas Markunas, because he is a Catholic, so it's going to be like influenced, his views are going to be influenced by the Catholic Church, but a lot of what he says is true, because I had this experience with Reiki, and I think that the whole of this practice is like inviting negative entities into you. But in particular, I had this experience with the lady that laid hands on me, and then after that I received like a nightmare, and I understood that I opened myself up to thousands of demons into my life, and then I renounced it and I closed all the doors. But I think it's actually about Reiki itself, but that practitioner wasn't like leading a life of purity also, because after I wrote about this, she actually read an article, and the first thing she called me to say is not oh my God, how are you? I'm so sorry. I will try to do all I can to, make sure you're well. No. She didn't tell anything about this. But the first thing she told me is to remove her name from my articles so that nobody knows about this. I mean, this is about business for her. And people who have psychic abilities, who are, employed for that, they must have God as their priority, because when you have God as your priority, you will naturally become empathetic, you will have compassion, you will naturally become compassionate, you will operate from the heart, and the first question, if some problem arises from your services, would be to help the person and not to save your ass. So yeah, that's my experience, and that's what he says in this book, that you may actually, if the person with psychic abilities doesn't lead pure life, you may actually end up getting entities from them. And interestingly, he writes about astrology, and not from a negative perspective, which is unusual in Christian circles, but he says, he actually told, maybe not in this particular chapter, but in this particular section, but I do remember that he told that good astrologers do not only look at the chart, but they also have other sources of information, like intuitionally they receive it, and it's intuitively they receive it, and it's true, especially if people are open to that. Because when I get astrology orders, I feel if a person is closed or open. Some people do it out of curiosity, but they're very closed, and it's much more difficult to interpret their chart, because all I have is just the planets to look at. Yet if a person is very open, and I have some clients who are every year ordering from me, we have very good connection, and I feel straight away what's in their lives, why they sought my services this time, and I could easily understand what problem is now in their lives and help them. And I can easily identify why they are now needing my services, because there's always a good reason for that. Like God sends them to get these things read, because they themselves may not be able to yet tune into that. And so everything flows so freely. But if a person is closed, then the information is only gotten from the chart. So here he says in this book that good astrologers use intuition, not only looking at the chart, but they will employ intuition also. And also in this particular section, he says that horoscopes show the main direction of the dark and light program, of the dark and light programs. So basically he says that birth charts can show the main direction where you're heading. And he says that if there's negative direction shown, it means it's been inherited from your relatives. Like in astrology, we say it's from past lives. And he says that if you change your ways, if you never do engage in negative things, then you can actually change your destiny. That's what he says. And another important thing he mentions in connection with astrology is that some people become so dependent on astrologers that they have to use them all the time, and this is true. Some people become too dependent because those astrologers, if they're good, they can, through intuition, access, their current problems and help them to solve it. But then this should be just used a little bit like a guidance, and not to be, that astrologer shouldn't become like the replacement of their intuition, because then they will not develop their own sensitivity. So astrology is good to use for understanding trends, understanding yourself better, but then it should be like guidance, and then you have to use your intuition to proceed in life and not keep going back to astrologers for that. Interestingly, he says that now it's about, he writes about people who ask for money. So some people do it honestly because they really don't have food to eat, and some people it's just their business. But what an interesting take. He says that we should give them nevertheless, whether they are cheating us or not, because these people have some kind of problem, otherwise they wouldn't be asking for money. And maybe it's not the problem of lack, but they obviously have some spiritual problem, otherwise they wouldn't do that. So what he says to do is just give a little bit, don't give too much, give a little bit, and then with giving you should say like a prayer for the forgiveness of their transgressions and for the forgiveness of the sins of their past generations and families, so that they're released from the world of darkness and that they see their situation clearly and are able to get out of it. So basically, even if they are not in lack, they maybe just became negative people because of all the transgressions that they did, and we are just helping through that gesture and prayer for them to be freed. And yet again, I agree with what he says in the next chapter, which is about people who are unable to find jobs, because those who have very good skills, they will always be in demand. So it's not that the world is cruel and not giving them jobs, it's just they are lacking in skills. It's really the truth, and I find it in so many cases that if people really try to work and they develop themselves, they will always be in demand. They will always be in demand. But those who complain about jobs, they're not interested in developing their skills, those are the ones that lack jobs. Oh, and I also should address a comment that I got, I think in response to my second review of this book, is that the person was very suspicious of all the religions that encourage the birth of children. And I personally do not want to have children, but I don't see it as like an evil thing. Of course, humanity should continue, and some people have this mission to bring forth children. But I think it is old-fashioned to just believe that every woman should have children, because creations can come forth not only through like in a form of a child, but also in the form of what you do in life, how you're helping people, what work you're producing. So that's my opinion, and I think it's because in the past women were seen as like their purpose in life was pretty much to give birth to children, and that's still the religions that we have today. Here he says in another chapter that actually when someone close to you passes, we should not be too sad about this, crying all the time and wanting the person not to be dead, because this actually hinders the soul in the journey in the afterlife, and it keeps them locked, keeps them close to that person. And a soul that is disembodied should move on. And we should even pray for the forgiveness of transgressions of those who died who were negative people, because those sins make them sometimes would make them unable to progress in the afterlife. So they would be here in this realm, they may start causing problems. So again, they may have been bad people, but for the health and happiness of the humanity in general, we should pray for them to move on, so that they are forgiven and they can easily pass on to another realm. And here he also says that after the death of a person who was negative, we shouldn't remember the bad things that they did, because it hinders yet again them from moving on into the afterlife. Here he says that when a person is close to death, they often see close people that are already dead, like brothers, sisters, husband, wife, and so forth. And we should pray for those who are dead, not as though they are dead, but as souls. We should see them as living souls that are passing into another realm, and we should see them in our minds and pray for them as though for people who are alive, yet they are no longer in the bodily form. And he says that it's important for everyone to pray for the souls of every person, because if that person has many sins, they may stay in the dark world, and that dark world will try to destroy their souls. So that not to have this destiny, every person should receive prayers so that they can move on to like a safe place in the afterlife. Here he says that after the death of a physical body, there is a place for the person to travel in the afterlife, yet if that person was too much attached to the earth, that path is closed. For example, a person builds a house and values that house more than anything. After death, this person's substance could remain in that house, and then when new people move into that house, they may experience problems because of that substance there. That's a very interesting story about a thing that happened in 1990. I don't know if it was in Lithuania or not. It could be. He uses a lot of Lithuanian examples, but here he says that in 1990, I received a call from one woman who was worried about her daughter's health. The daughter found in some journal information that she can invite spirits to get answers to her questions. So she did that with her friends. She, with her friends, hung a needle on a string, and she was holding that needle above an alphabet, so that the needle would be directed to certain letters to form answers. And this lasted about 3 months. And after that, the daughter's health started getting worse, and she started getting weaker. And it turned out, probably he saw once he was asked for help. So this author saw probably that the woman was playing with a soul that had stayed earthbound for 90 years, and who, together with other similar earthbound souls, was feeding off the life energy of that particular daughter, and in this way was worsening the aura of that girl. And he advised to ask for the forgiveness of this transgression, but also he told that daughter to pray for that soul that isn't able to leave this earth, so that the sins of that soul are forgiven, so that that soul can move on. And this helped. It happened. The soul moved on, and that girl was no longer getting weaker. And here he shares another story of a woman who couldn't sleep anymore. She was so mentally exhausted, and she was so nervous because every night before sleep she would see her dead mother standing beside her, near at the, not the bedside, but near where her feet were, beside, like at the side of the bed where her feet were, where that woman's feet were when she was sleeping, if you know what I mean. So she would see that the deceased mother standing there, and it turns out that, and that mother wouldn't speak, it would just look at her. And through his psychic abilities, this author was able to understand that it's because the mother was buried without like rituals, Catholic rituals, and after they held like church service for her, those visits of her mother stopped. So I think it's not because Catholic religion is the true religion, but I think it could happen if such a person had beliefs like that the Christian religion is true, and then they died and weren't buried according to the custom. Maybe that soul itself would not find peace within. And he tells of other few stories. I found them very interesting, these ones. I will tell from what I remember because it's a long story, but basically the family contacted her, this author, and they experienced demon possession. So one person experienced demon possession, the girl in the family, because she kept seeing snakes going through her eyes and like weird things like this. And then he managed to free her through prayer and so forth. And then another, soon after, the grandfather of that family became possessed and wanted to kill her grandmother, because he said that in young years she cheated on him, and she said, I really didn't cheat him, but he wanted to kill her. And then again, this author managed to help that grandfather, and then again something happened, and it turned out after the arrival of the author to that house that he saw like a soul structure, he says, above the well of that village, that homestead or something like that. And then he asked, what was here where the well is now? And he said, actually, and the family said that actually there was a house there before, but it burned, and one person burned in it, and it was like a really bad person, and he wasn't buried properly. He was buried not even in a graveyard, but near a graveyard because of his sins. So priests weren't like not willing to bury him with like people who didn't sin as much. And so because of this, that soul wasn't able to move on, and it was just causing problems in that family. So after they held a church service for this person and prayed for him to move on and to be forgiven his sins, everything became normal, and that soul never tortured them again and probably moved on to the afterlife. He says here, I remind you never to judge even a person who committed many sins, because if you judge, you will be judged. Okay, this video is getting very long and I still have a way to go, so So that will be it for now. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Take care.